Hello and welcome to another podcast of Indigenous Roots and Hoots, produced by the Legacy of Hope Foundation. I'm your host, Gordon Spence, and today my guest is Michelle Mainville. Michelle's parents are survivors of the residential school system, so she's an intergenerational survivor herself. She's also a survivor of the Sixties Scoop, a government policy to remove Indigenous children from their families and place them in homes of non-Indigenous families, some as far away as Australia and Europe. She was trafficked as a child from the age of 12 years old until she managed to leave when she was 21. She was also an addict during that period until she began to turn her life around and begin her healing process. Her daughter was tragically murdered in Toronto by her traffickers. Michelle currently works as a youth addictions counselor in Winnipeg, Manitoba, working with girls who are and have been sexually exploited. Hello and welcome, Michelle. How are you today?
I'm good. Bonjour, bonjour.
Good to hear you. Good to see you. Maybe you can just start by telling us a little bit about your family background. Like, I know you're from somewhere on Manitoulin Island. Maybe you can just talk about your home reserve and a little bit about your family background.
Yeah, both my parents are from residential school, and they went to St. Mary's Residential and St. Anne's. My father is from Cochiching by Fort Francis, Ontario, and my mother is from Aningaming by Nestor Falls. That's in between Fort Francis and Kenora. Let's start from the beginning. I guess so you could say that my father was very abusive. And my mother had left him when I was very young, say about before I was 1 year old. During that time when my mom had us, she couldn't handle all of us because there was 6 of us. So we were eventually taken away, put in foster homes, non-Aboriginal foster homes, until I was about the age of 5. Both my parents are Ojibwe. Yeah.
You mentioned that your parents both attended residential school.
Yes.
How has this affected your life?
It affected me quite a bit. My parents didn't know how to parent. I felt that was taken away from them when they were taken away from their parents. I didn't see a lot, but there was a lot of abuse in the home. See, you have to understand, I was just a baby at the time. My sister tells me a lot more stories of how we had to grow up with both parents. My mom is a fluent speaker. She never taught us because she always thought that we would never need our language. She never taught us our culture. So I grew up not knowing my language or my culture. And I thought that, abuse was the norm. Yeah.
You mentioned that you were a survivor of the 60s Scoop. Can you talk a bit about this and what was it like? How old were you when you were scooped up?
I was about 1 before I was 1 till I was about 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock. Sorry. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. I'm just joking. Sorry. Till I was 5 years old. I don't remember much of that part of my life because I was just a baby still. We were placed in a home. When I look back at my documents, I was a very quiet baby. I wouldn't respond to people. My sister, when I told her about my documents, she said, well, it was felt because you were traumatized, why you were very quiet and, despondent to anybody. So, yeah.
Where did you live?
We lived in Kenora. We were placed with my grandma for a little bit, but then we ended up in a home there in Kenora. We were going to be adopted out down to the States, but I guess so the band stepped in and they stopped the adoption.
Right. How old were you when you left the home?
My mom got us back, I'd say around when I was before I was 5. She had remarried a non-native down in the States, got us back.
Right. You state in your bio that you were trafficked as a child between the ages of 12 till, I guess, when you left at 21. Mm-hmm. How were you trafficked and how did you manage to leave the situation? When you say trafficked, what do you mean?
I was sold. sold men. Let me just get a little bit more into that. When I was about 6, 7, I was sexually abused by my stepfather's brothers. I was being sexually abused, like growing up, like till I was about 10. And then that's when we moved to Winnipeg. That's where I started acting out. And my mom didn't understand why I was, but it was from the trauma of being sexually abused for so many years. But when I was at the age of 12, I had seen one of my friends. We were in school and I was always running away. I was always running away, dating older guys, not knowing that I was being sexually exploited. But they would give me a place to stay, booze, drugs, anything that I wanted, just as long as, I would do sexual favors. So I had met this girl, my friend, and I was wondering why she was having like these really nice things. Like she had nice clothes, she had money, and she told me, "Well, come meet my boyfriend." And so I met her boyfriend. He let me stay, and then he said, "Well, do you want to make money?" And I thought at this time, like I might as well make money. Men were always like on me, like, and I figured, I might as well make money off this. So he would set up dates. I was called a baby prostitute. So like a lot of older men, they would buy me. At that time, I really didn't know that he was making thousands off of us. He would give me like $20 here, $20 there. And I was thinking, oh my God, that is a lot of money, because you're only 12. Don't think, I worked with him till I was about 14. And then I was finally able to get away. By this time, I was put in CFS in Winnipeg already because my mom couldn't handle me. So she put me in children's aid. So I told my worker what I was doing. And so she locked me up. So that's how I was able to get away from the pimp. When I got out, I got involved with the gangs, Aboriginal gangs here in Winnipeg. I started kind of like working for them, bringing in the money, if they needed drugs or anything like that. And then when I was about 17, by this time I was already using hard drugs. And then I had met my drug dealer, and I ended up having a child from him. And I thought, okay, well, I'm finally out of the working and everything, but that wasn't the case. We ended up breaking up, and I ended up meeting another gang member, and he was like one of the head leaders of the largest Aboriginal gangs here in Winnipeg. So I hooked up with him, and I ended up working for him. Like he would sell me off. I ended up having another kid. By this time, I was already heavily addicted to cocaine. Just anything I could get my hands on.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you what you were an addict at a young age, and I was going to ask you what kind of drugs were you taking? Cocaine and were there
cocaine. Back then they had mixed Tolwyn and Ritalin. It was called a poor man's heroin. I was into that. I did cocaine. I drank a lot. Yeah, it was just like to numb, so I didn't have to feel like these men. Like I didn't want to have to deal with them when I was sober. So like I would get really wasted and do my thing.
Mm-hmm. How did you manage to get out of this cycle that you were in?
Funniest thing, I was up in the Paw, Manitoba, and I just had my daughter. My partner at that time, he ended up going back to Stony Mountain, so I was able to leave, and I went back down to Winnipeg. I had already given up my children. I didn't want them to see me as an addict and, working, so I gave them up to family. And by this time, I was really heavily into my addiction. And just one day, I was sitting in a hotel on Higgins Avenue, and I was going to commit suicide. I was just tired of my life. And so I had strung myself up. Lucky the bar broke. I ended up on my butt. And I just thought, I can't do this anymore. So I packed up whatever I had, which was just a little backpack, and I hitchhiked out of town. My sister was living in Thunder Bay at that time, and she said, well, if you come here, you got to go to treatment. And I told her, yeah, that I was ready. And that was the end of that.
And then you began your treatment and started your healing from that point?
Yeah. I was able to find out like what my culture was. I went to an Aboriginal treatment center in Thunder Bay. I learned about my culture and learned healthy ways to heal. I did a lot of ceremonies, got my name, got my colors. I ended up having a nut house romance while I was in treatment, which you're not supposed to. But I had met the father of my two youngest kids while I was in treatment. He wasn't a client. He was just there for AA roundup.
Okay. I know this question is a little bit difficult or subject for you, and you don't have to answer it. There have been many Indigenous women and girls who have gone missing and murdered, and your daughter was one of them. Do you want to speak on this? Like I said, you don't have to if you don't feel comfortable doing it. I know it's a very difficult subject for you to talk about.
Yeah, I don't mind. Like when I talk about her story, it's healing for me. Although I do have a hard time talking about it, but her story needs to be told because she was human trafficked. Like when I said I had two younger kids, my daughter, when she was about 18, 19, I started noticing that she was getting a lot of messages from these kind of men on her Facebook telling her how beautiful she was and, that they can give her a good life and, just really grooming her. Like that's what grooming is, like telling her the things that she wanted, that she was wanting to listen. And she eventually ended up going down to Toronto. I would notice on her Facebook that she was hanging around with these certain kind of men. And she was getting like her nails done, her hair done. And I started noticing that she was getting all these things and she was partying. I just started noticing things like first when she went to Toronto, she stayed at a young woman's shelter, and she had met a girl there, and I think that's who had recruited her, because I find those places like group homes or things like that. It's a big thing to recruit girls because they're in a vulnerable state. So I seen her with a lot of pictures with this girl with these men, and I asked her because she didn't have a job, she didn't have education. And I asked her, like, how are you getting these things? Oh, my boyfriend's buying it for me and everything. I said, but like, baby, I said, they're going to make you pay for that. Oh, no, he won't. He loves me. And I said, baby, that's not love. They're going to make you pay for it one way or another. And I had told my daughter about my story, about me working and everything, so that she wouldn't go down the same path. And I had told her, she had told me, she goes, I'm never going to be like you. And at this point, I knew that she was being trafficked. Prior to her passing away, she was raped behind a young woman's shelter. And it was recorded and they didn't do nothing. And she had called me and she told me, she goes, I want to come home now. And I told her, okay, baby. But she told me she couldn't. They wouldn't let her. And by this time, she was already too far, I guess maybe into death, or because I would see pictures of her bruised up, scraped up. That was them beating her up. On the night of April 25th, 2013, she was in a cab on the 401, and something must have happened. She didn't want to go where she was supposed to go. She had to go to a condo to meet up with a John. And she had jumped out of the 401, out of the cab. And police were called. And I believe that her traffickers were following her. They put her back in the cab and they followed her to the condo where she would have to meet up with a John. When she got to the condo, a fight ensued. She didn't want to be there. She was crying. She was in distress. And police were called the second time. And they came to the door, and there's a recording of her crying. She wanted to leave. She was screaming. I was asked if I wanted to listen to the recording, but I couldn't. And usually police, when it's domestic, they would go into the unit and extract that woman and ask them if they're okay. They didn't do that to my daughter. And then somehow they got to the balcony and there was still fighting. Police were called the third time. By this time, it was already too late. They had found her on the ground from the 24th floor. I believe the guy had thrown her off. They didn't do no investigation. Like right away, it was a suicide. So the next morning, I get a knock on the door. I was living in Manitoulin Island at that time. It was a police officer at my door, and he asked me who I was, if I was Michelle Mainville. I said yes. And he goes, "Is there anybody else in the house?" I said, "Yes, my husband." He goes, "Can you ask him to come out?" And I'm thinking, okay, well, my husband did something wrong, you know. And then he goes, "I have bad news." He goes, Cheyenne passed away last night. At first, I didn't want to believe it. So I ended up asking him, I said, "Give me the division that found her. I want to make sure it's her." So he gave me the number. I called the division and I spoke to the police officer, and I wanted to make sure it was her. And I asked him, I said, "I'm mother of Cheyenne Fox." I said, "I want to know what happened and I want to make sure that it's her." He goes, "Well, her IDs were on her. It's her." And I asked him, I said, "Well, what happened?" And he goes, really, really rude. He goes, "Well, did you know she was a prostitute? She was on drugs and she jumped." He said, "It is what it is." I couldn't fathom what he was saying to me. So I told him, to F off, and I hung up. Yeah. So we had the task of bringing her home. We had her funeral in my apartment. And she lives behind her son. Yeah. So we were able to change her death certificate to undetermined, but that's as far as we got. There was a lot of promises to us that they would give the guy a lie detector test. They didn't do it because they said he was too traumatized. We'll never get no justice for my daughter. I believe because she is Aboriginal. She is Native. That didn't define her, like what she was doing, who she was. She was a very beautiful young girl. A lot of potential. She was loved by many. People loved her. She had a crazy sense of humor. I do a lot of presentations now on human trafficking and sexual exploitation. And I do tell about my daughter's story because, by telling her story, at least, I wish that, I hope that we reach one young girl or even one young man. But yeah, that's what happened to her.
Yeah, there's been a lot of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in the last number of years. And we were just doing a bit of research on this, and the statistics for missing and murdered Indigenous women is staggering. From 2001 to 2015, the homicide rate for Indigenous women in Canada was almost 6 times higher than other women. And in Nunavut, Yukon, Northwest Territories, Manitoba, and Alberta, and Saskatchewan, these numbers were even higher. 2014, a report found that more than 1,000 Indigenous women had been murdered in the last 30 years in Canada. So that's about 100 per year. And Indigenous women, in another final report, Indigenous women and girls are 12 times more likely to be murdered or missing than other women in Canada, and 16 times more likely than Caucasian women. And these statistics just keep going on and on. And I know right now, and I really, feel for you and what you had to go through, and especially how you describe how it was handled in a very disrespectful way to you and to her, to your daughter. You now find yourself working with Indigenous youth, and I understand you are currently working as a youth addictions worker. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
I left Winnipeg in 1991 because Winnipeg was like where all my trauma happened. I just recently moved back to Winnipeg in April. I heard about this job, so I applied, not really knowing what it really was, but it was a youth addictions worker, and didn't really get the concept like whether or not who I'll be working with. But I'm working with girls that are sexually exploited from the ages of 12 to 17. When I got healing, I went back to school. I've worked all over Ontario, working with youth. And my passion was to work with young girls that are sexually exploited or human trafficked. And when I got this job, I was like, wow, okay, I can do something with this. We provide a program for them. It's a 31-day program. They come into our unit and we give them tools that they need in order to move forward and to get out of the sex trade industry. It's amazing how many young girls are in Winnipeg that are sexually exploited. So we support them no matter what. We do harm reduction. If they make some wrong choices, we support them no matter what. We try to make them feel at home, that, that they're loved, and try to let them be kids again. Back in my day, we never had any of these kind of programs. I wish I did. It's a good program. It's a pilot project. It's just getting off the ground. We've had a couple girls, but yeah, it's just getting off the ground. So I think it's a really good program.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's so appropriate for you. I think I worked with you for a while, several years ago, and you were a youth worker. And I thought that you did a great job with the work that you were doing with the youth that were being incarcerated. Tomorrow is a National Day of Truth and Reconciliation in Canada. What's your feelings on this? I mean, it's supposed to be a day of recognizing Indigenous people and what Indigenous people have gone through. I guess to Canada, the rest of Canadians. We're trying to educate the Canadian public about the histories of Indigenous people in Canada and to try and create a better understanding. How do you feel about this whole reconciliation?
Oh, gee, there's a lot I could say about that, but, it's good that the truth is coming out. Our truth and reconciliation has been hidden for far too long. The genocide, the intergenerational trauma, it's been hidden so long. Our people really need to heal now, Coming back to Winnipeg, I see a lot of healing that needs to be done. And I see a lot of sleeping elders on the street. And I'm glad that, it's finally come out. It's not hidden anymore. It's in your face now. How are we going to deal with it now? I know that there needs to be a lot more healing programs, help with homelessness, addiction, and to stop that intergenerational trauma. Let's start with the kids. I always believe the youth are our leaders. Start with that. I'm wearing my orange shirt right now. I might check out some festivities here in Winnipeg. Yeah.
Right on. Okay, Michelle, we're getting down to the end of our podcast here. The last question I always ask our guests is tell a funny story or a joke, just to, kind of lighten the load up. Some of the subjects we talk about are quite serious, and as Indigenous people, in particular Indian people, like quote unquote, are always telling funny stories. I guess it's part of our resiliency and our coping mechanism to deal with, some of the traumas that we've gone through over the years. So I wonder if you have a joke for us or something, a funny story to tell.
I got so many. I don't think it's appropriate, though.
This is a family show. So.
Yes, I understand. Jay, I can't think of anything right now.
Okay. That's fine. We've been talking to Michelle Mainville. She's an amazing woman. She's had a really difficult life. She's a courageous survivor, very strong woman. And I admire her for her resiliency and still able to laugh and joke and look at life in a positive light. So on behalf of the Legacy of Hope Foundation, Michelle, I wanted to thank you very much for taking the time to do this. I know some of the subjects are difficult for you to talk about.
Miigwech.
Thank you very much. Miigwech, Egusi.
Yeah, Bamapi.
Egusi.
Roots and Hoots is produced by the Legacy of Hope Foundation. For more podcasts like this, please visit our website at legacyofhope.ca.